Hey guys, this is the second part of the tutorial that I was showing you earlier. So in earlier I finished explaining about all the markup that I have and how I use Knockout.js and stuff. Let's go ahead and run this application. Let me show you what this application does. Of course, it's not fancy at all. All it's doing, basically, this client basically calling the JSONP provider, in this case the PHP and MySQL database, and populating that here. That's all it does. But this will give you idea. You can do all kind of cool stuff here. All the data that was there in the MySQL database is populated in the SQL Server using, of course, the JSONP. Right? Let's look into the JavaScript how to do that configuration. Like I told you, to all this is happening from this JavaScript file here, JSONP without jQuery.js. So I would go into this file here, and very first thing I would like to show you is here. So basically all I have here is a function. This function doesn't take any parameter, and a bunch of things is done right here inside this ... and then it's get invoked right away. So this is called self-executing anonymous function, or whatever people call it, iffy or whatever. So you got the idea. Basically I need to have some sort of reference here. This reference of this object is provided to city provider variable in this file. Okay, let's go ahead and look into what this guy is doing. Okay, you start running this self-executing function. Very first thing you see is the invocation of download method here, right? Execution of download method. And then to the download method, what you're doing is basically providing my PHP server. So basically it's running from the local host from my IIS 8, and this is the directory. Go into PHP project 1 directory, go into index.php, and to the query string of this one pass callback, as you can see right here. Basically this callback, and I will tell you why I have a city provider.jsonp callback later, and this is the method that would be invoked once that has been loaded into the head section. Well, I haven't explained to you how the download works. Basically on download I pass the file path. I basically create I say, okay, get elements by tag name. Go to my DOM object and find the head tag and give me the first one. And then I would like to create a script tag here by using create element JavaScript function, JavaScript method. And this is the tag. This is the DOM object that I'm creating. And then I'm going to go ahead and set some attribute of that object, and the source is going to be this guy right here. Okay. And then once I have all those set, I basically insert or append that script DOM object into the head of my HTML. That is that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is basically I'm going to create an object called world city JavaScript function or object here, right? And this, on the constructor of this object, it takes name, country code, district, and population. It takes 4 parameters. And then since, like I told you, I'm using the Knockout.js to bind the data, so I'm making this object as a observable object. All this property is observable. Basically, this is a concept of Knockout. Observable helps you do a binding, dual binding, and stuff like that. I will be creating courses in Knockout, but this is not course. This is not topic in Knockout. So basically, let's just for now just say this one help us to bind the property later in the page. And basically it's very simple. Basically a JavaScript object, right? And then in here, line number 21, I basically create an array that is called observable array. My goal is I'm going to put those city one by one into that array. And finally, and then what I have here is basically this function called JSONP callback. Here is a JSONP callback. As you can see, this method corresponds to this one. So basically, when JSONP callback method, to this callback method, the world city is provided. world city is a JSON object given by PHP and MySQL to us. And then here, starting from line 24, I'm to this argument, I'm saying if this argument is defined and it is an object, and then I know it's an array of object, but to be sure, how do I know it's an array or not? Because I can say, hey, whatever you are, hey object, do you know what this splice is? Well, if you know, I know for sure that you are an array. You are an array because array has this method defined in it. Good. And if all this condition is true, I'm happy. You know, it is an array, it has some data, it is an object. All cool. Then I need to process one by one for all the JSON data. To do that, this world, now there it has a for each method, right? I think this for each method is kind of new. It is known to the newest browser, but the old browser doesn't have this property. So always make sure you kind of provide a fallback if needed. So here I'm saying, hey browser, do you know, go to the prototype chain of the array and ask, hey, do you know what this for each is? If this one doesn't throw an exception, if then it knows what it is, then basically I go ahead and call this for each method here. And on each iteration of for each, basically I'm putting a city info, world city info into that city array. Basically go over all of them, process all of them, put that data into the cities. And once that is all done, well, basically, you know, a per city has a name and a country code and district and population, all those information. Once all those things done, I need to call this, you know, the knockout apply bindings. To the bindings, I'm just passing my observable array to it. Of course, you know, like this one here, since I told you I'm not going to use jQuery, if I had used jQuery, I could have used each method also instead of using for each. And then if it is older browser, I have to provide my own implementation of for each, which I haven't done it yet. And then of course, you know, this pattern of writing JavaScript is called modular pattern. And here all these function and this variable are local to this scope. So they don't have access to the outside world. To be able, so that what we have to do next is we have to return something so when this object gets called, so that's what I'm returning. I'm returning the callback function, and I'm also returning all of the current cities as the cities here. So the idea is something like this. Let's see this and close that. If you, let's say, if I collapse all of them, all I have left here is this anonymous function, and that return an object literal. It has a two key value pair, right, to header information. Okay. And the other thing that I told you is, like, instead of writing JSONP callback, I had to write city.provider, is because this method JSONP callback is not in the outside of function. The scope of this one is inside the city provider. It's not to the window.city provider. So that's why I have to use a city provider.jsonp callback. That is all you need to do to be able to consume JSONP services provided by this PHP service. And yeah, let's go ahead and run it. And let's run in a different browser. Instead, grab this URL and let's run it into Chrome browser. Make sure it works in Chrome. Looks good. As I already saw, it also works in IO, right? We can see whether it works in a Firefox. Let's make sure it also works in a Firefox. Good, it works everywhere, right? That's good. Well, of course, not everywhere. All the browser, our latest version of the browser, maybe the for each method is not supported in the earliest version of the browser, so we have to be aware of that. You know, some of people, I don't know how many people are still using the i6. we have to, I don't know, it's very little, very few people, but we have